What is up, Codename fans? Simon here. Welcome to HannaTalk. Hope you're all doing absolutely fantastic. I know this year has been absolutely crazy, but we're almost at the end of this. 2021 is going to be a fantastic year, I can guarantee you that. And today I'm here with a very special guest. Now, he is a voice actor who is best known to fans as the voice of number 1 and 2 on Codename Kids Next Door. But he's also played across in series such as Muppet Babies, Hey Arnold, the Marvel and DC Universe, Tales of Ladybug and Cat Noir, but he's also starred across in anime such as Stitch, Blood Plus, Bleach, Naruto, Seven Deadly Sins, Sailor Moon, and much, much more. Please welcome the amazing Ben Diskin.
Hi! I'm the guy you just talked about. Hi, how you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Ben. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Thanks for having me on your show, dude.
Absolutely. It's an absolute honor to have you on board. And now, speaking about, of course, with, as mentioned about, of course, with 2020, during this time with the pandemic, how have you been keeping things up, especially on the acting side of things?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's... how much time you got? We have been, like, by we, I mean everybody in the voiceover industry has been effectively jumping through hoops in order to stay employed. So everybody's been upgrading their at-home recording capabilities. I mean, at the end of the day, we can't compete with like the professional grade stuff that you get in a real studio, but we've all kind of upped our game enough to where our home recording equipment and quality is at an acceptable level for professional engineers to take it and EQ it and work with it in order for it to actually go into professional projects. So as a result of this stuff, we're kind of fortunate in that compared to the rest of the acting industry, and by that I mean like on-camera stuff, we're all still, for the most part, able to continue to work. So yeah, work has been relatively, I guess, stable for me. I'm lucky in that regard. It's been a hassle, and I'm not a fan of working from home. I really like working with other human beings in a air-conditioned room because my booth has zero AC and it gets super hot real quick. But other than that, yeah, I'm very fortunate that I'm able to continue to keep going with my work, and that most of my friends are in a similar position.
Fantastic. That definitely seems to be the case with a lot of voice actors nowadays. I've spoken to a lot of the voice actors over this year. Like, I've had so many guests across this year because of the pandemic, and they've all spoken about the same thing, about how some of them have set up, actually a majority of them have set up like home studios, like due to this pandemic, but also a lot of them have actually set up home studios well before before 2020 struck. So,
Yes.
so that seems to have been the case in that sense. It's definitely true about what you said about with regards to animation in that sense. Even though animation takes quite a bit longer to come out in terms of releasing it out to the public because of how much goes into animation with not just the voice acting but with all the other aspects of it. In the sense, it's kind of the one industry that hasn't stopped in that sense. Whereas with live action
Yeah.
work, it still has to. With live action work, it's kind of been put to a grinding halt in some way.
Absolutely. I mean, when you think about it, our stay-at-home orders, our mask mandates, our social distancing stuff, like it's like, well, it's really hard to, for instance, I don't know, star in a romantic comedy where you have to stand 6 feet away from the person you're supposed to be having a smooch fest with on screen and not wearing masks. It's like, so as a result, you go on some of these sets, and some of them have been shut down due to COVID-19 transmission there. But when it's voiceover, we can all do it from the safety of our own homes, and yeah, we're lucky that we can just kind of keep on rolling with the old punches. Like I'm very fortunate that I invested a crap load of money into the recording booth that I have and the microphone that I'm using prior to the pandemic, because I mean, when I really sit down and think about how much I spent, it's approximately $10,000. But I was fortunate that I was saving that up over a long, long period of time for just this purpose of being able to record from home. So this didn't hit me like a like a ton of bricks, but other people are like, oh my god, I have to get all this stuff right now, holy cow, and it's terrifying for people in that position. So I feel very, very fortunate that I just so happened to be weirdly obsessed enough with audio for my auditions that I went through all this stuff already. But yeah, it's no joke, but it's also lucky.
That's fantastic, and that's absolutely wonderful in that sense. Now let's get started with talking about the beginning of your acting bug, so to speak. How did you get started in acting?
Oh, I got started in acting because my parents are both actors, and when I was still just a little zygote developing in my mother's womb, their talent agency at the time said, "Hey, when your kid is born, you want us to represent him?" And they said, "Sure." So they signed me up with an agent before I was yet to be born, so I basically came into the world with like talent agency representation, and I started doing commercials and little tiny things here and there as a baby. Mostly it was mostly baby modeling, I guess you could call it. Like, we're gonna have you eat chicken McNuggets in this McDonald's commercial, and hey, I was like 1.5. Sure, I'll sit there and smile and eat processed food, no problem. So that was kind of like how it all started. But my parents didn't put me in because they thought, oh, he'll be a star, just like mommy and daddy always wanted to be, but never happened. Nah, like that. I was fortunate that my parents are very realistic, and instead they just sort of said like, no, we would like to see you make some money as a kid that we can put away towards your college tuition, so you can, go to school and get a real job that will actually pay your bills, because acting is wildly unreliable. But lo and behold, the acting thing has actually just stayed very consistent for me through voiceover, and I'm still doing it today. So I'm just kind of like, all right, well, I mean, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so that's how I got my start. Is just mom and dad just said like, put him in, see what happens.
Fantastic. That's absolutely wonderful. And that's amazing about how you spoke about in the fact that your parents are both actors themselves. And it's funny when you hear stories about, of course, with a lot of child actors. And this reminds me of an article from Mara Wilson, who many fans out there will know as Matilda, in how she retired from the acting industry and went on to writing novels and memoirs regarding about child acting in the industry, and how so many child actors have been through so many struggles in that sense because they didn't have the foundation to help get them through the industry. But I guess in the sense for any child actor, especially ones that have parents who are actors themselves, they have that foundation to help keep them out of the dark parts of the industry, so to speak, and like steer them along in the right direction in that sense.
Oh, absolutely. There's part of the problem is that and we're talking about specifically stage parents. There's a reason why that has its own term. Is because it's people who don't really understand the entertainment industry. They don't understand what the dangers are, what things to watch out for, but they just want their kids to be famous, and so they sort of break down a lot of those safety barriers themselves because they think it's hampering their child's access to success. And so then the kid winds up being exposed to things that they absolutely should never be exposed to, even adults shouldn't be exposed to, and it winds up screwing up that kid, and it's really a shame. So yeah, no, I was very fortunate that my parents had very realistic expectations, and as soon as they saw something that was not okay, they didn't scare me. They didn't say, "Oh my gosh, stay away from that man." They'd go, "Okay, honey, why don't you play over here? Why don't we stay away from those people? Yeah, they have they have some habits that aren't so good." And I was oblivious to it, and I just went, "Okay," and I was safe. So yeah, I was very fortunate that I had experienced parents to guide me through this instead of weirdly starstruck parents pushing me into it. So yeah, I was very lucky.
Fantastic. Now, of course, you've listed down in the factor that your parents, of course, are actors themselves, but who are also your other biggest influences?
Ooh, I mean, basically anybody who was doing voiceover work in the 90s, I would say, because those are really my formative years. So like everybody who I grew up listening to, those are the people who inspire me, because I was like, wow, you guys made my childhood, and holy cow, now I get to work with you. Dang, okay. So yeah, if not people in that situation, it's usually people who can just do something that's really unique that I'm incapable of doing. Like whenever I see somebody who can, for instance, sing really, really well in different cartoon voices, that really impresses me, because I'm not even good at singing in my own voice, let alone doing a character voice and also hitting the correct notes in what is effectively a foreign version of my own throat. So, like, the people who can do that are just like, oh yeah, hit that note, yeah, no problem. That to me blows me away.
Fantastic. That's absolutely wonderful. And speaking about, of course, with childhoods, we've actually got a fan question. I've got a fan question here from, and I apologize if I mispronounced the name here, Elizabeth Munoz. Shout out to you, by the way, Isabella. That's fantastic. She asks, what do you think about your craft, as you've made a lot of people's childhoods be amazing?
It's so weird to hear that, because, like, okay, most of the people who say that to me are practically my age, or maybe only like 5 years younger than me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, am I like really way older than I think? And I'm like, oh no, that's right, it's just because I was a kid doing things that they watched when they were a kid. So there's always that kind of like minor like like bizarre, like it just hits my ear wrong, I guess, to hear. But I think that I'm slowly but surely just kind of getting used to that, and it's flattering, but it's also just sort of strange, you know, from my perspective. I'm going into a room and nobody else is there, and it's just me and a microphone, and I'm just making silly noises and talking in weird voices into a microphone, and then I don't want to say forget about it, but I just put it out of my mind. And so the idea that this is suddenly going to appear on television, that potentially hundreds of thousands of people are going to watch and either like or dislike, it's sort of lost on me. So to find out somebody saying, you made my childhood, it's like, wait, you heard that? You heard all those weird noises I made into the microphone? Really? Oh, thanks. So I'm, like I said, I'm slowly starting to get used to it, but it's always flattering. It's never anything that I don't like hearing. But yeah, no, it's just neat. It's just neat to have that kind of effect on people, especially since other people had that effect on me.
Absolutely, that's definitely fantastic. And shout out to you, Isabella, for an awesome question like that. And to all the people out there listening, be sure to, when I make announcements for any guests that I have on HannaTalk, be sure to comment below if you have any special messages you want me to say, or any fan questions you want me to ask during the interview, because this is fantastic. This is absolutely amazing. So shout out to you, Isabella, for an awesome question. Now going back onto talking about with the series, so do you walk into like any series or project expecting to play like a certain role, or is it like a jack in the box, not knowing what's going to pop out?
Well, it depends. So sometimes if I've been auto-cast in something, which does not happen all the time, but when it does, it's like super cool. It's one of those things where you just find out what role you're going to play right when you walk into the room. They go, all right, so today you're going to be a serial killer, or today you're going to be a preschooler. And you just have to go, all right, yes, and what about this serial killer? And just go with it, right? And other times it's something that it's like a main character in a show, and you auditioned for it, so you already have some basic idea of what the character's like anyway, and it's not a huge surprise. They might tweak the voice a little bit or alter the performance some, but it's largely something that you're expecting. So it's kind of a combination of the two. But one of the things that you develop as you gain experience in this are, I guess you could call them like character templates, where it's like there's this vague idea of various character tropes that exist in your head, and when they tell you who this person is like, you start like mixing and matching and combining them until you figured out what kind of character you're going to be playing, and you immediately know how to tackle the roles. And that's just something that happens with like years and years and years of doing the same thing over and over again. It just becomes part of like your brain and how you put things together. So it's not really hard, but yeah, it's usually it's some kind of a fun challenge to try to figure out, all right, how am I going to approach this new character?
Right, that's absolutely fantastic. And it's interesting that you mentioned about that, because there have been a couple of interviews like where I was I remember back to a couple of interviews that I did, like with Richard Epcar, where he spoke about when he was voicing the Joker in the Injustice games, I believe, and how he spoke about that he had not heard Mark Hamill's version of the Joker, and he said he doesn't want to, because he doesn't want to end up copying Mark Hamill's version of the Joker, because that's really the version of the Joker that everyone has gone to in terms of like other adaptations of the Joker going forward. But also in another sense, Digimon actor Joshua Sev has said that he mostly tries to keep his voice roles down to his regular voice as much as possible because he wants to be kind of like natural in that sense. So, which I think is kind of extraordinary in that sense. So that's fantastic.
I think so.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic in that sense. And that's definitely true in that sense about how you've got some actors, for example, you instantly just recognize straight off the bat, like straight off the bat, just from hearing their voice alone in that sense. But some actors, you just go like, oh, I didn't realize Ben Diskin voiced Stitch, or I didn't realize he voiced like Malefa in Young Justice Season 3. So...
Yeah, well, it's the whole point of voice acting is not necessarily how many different voices you can do, and that's usually what everybody focuses on. But the reality is, it's more about how many different characters can you accurately and fairly portray. So, like, and I feel like he would agree with this. So I don't think I'm putting words into his mouth, but like a great example is Yuri Lowenthal, right? He mostly does his regular speaking voice. He doesn't tend to put on cartoon voices and do different things with his throat and stuff like that, but he works consistently because he's a good actor, and through his acting performance, he can convince you that he's this, emo ninja as Sasuke, or like this like wisecracking smart aleck as Peter Parker, and it's basically the same voice. He's really not doing anything differently, but the performance is enough to make you forget that it's the same actor and just focus on the character. And that's really what our job is. It's ideally, you don't really pay a ton of attention to who the actor is, right? We're like the man behind the curtain, to use a Wizard of Oz reference. We're not the person you should be focusing on. You should be focusing on the character that we're bringing to life, not well, there it is. There's Ben Diskin again doing his same Ben Diskin impression that he does for every single freaking character. Oh, everything sounds the same. Like, you shouldn't want that. And most good voice actors, whether they vary their voice or not, will have you convinced that you're just watching a character, and that's pretty cool to me.
Absolutely, and I think that's absolutely fantastic in that sense, and I think that's really, really amazing in that sense. And I think that's what a lot of people, I mean, obviously to like a lot of big anime fans, and this actually was from a quote that I heard from Katie Lee, who stars in Muppet Babies, said, where she spoke about that where voice actors, except for like people that go to comic conventions and are really huge fans of the craft and everything and know who these actors are, for the most part, she described voice actors as famously anonymously famous.
Oh, yeah.
So
No, that's I mean, listen, when I go out to, I don't know, go out for a walk or go run an errand, nobody ever stops me and goes, oh, you're a famous voice actor, Ben Diskin, oh my gosh, can I get an autograph? Like, even if they've seen, some of the stuff I'm in, they don't know it's me, which is kind of neat. Like, with the pandemic going on, we're all in America trying to wear masks. Well, about half the country is, don't get me started. But anyway, I have a mask that is of a character I play on a show called The Gretzko. It looks like Haida's face. And I have been wearing that thing for months. One person saw it and went, hey, is that from a Gretzko? And I'm like, yeah, it's Haida. And she went, oh my gosh, that's so cool. I was talking to her in my regular speaking voice. Haida is my regular speaking voice. She had no idea that I was that actor. Like, it did not click.
Oh, wow.
I'm not famous in that sense. I have control over my fame. If I want to go to a convention and have my picture in like their brochure, their schedule, okay, people will know who I am. But otherwise, no, I'm just some guy just going about his daily life, and then I have this alternate life where I can be as public or as private as I want, and it's just nifty.
Fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic in that sense. And that's just absolutely wonderful that you end up having a mask based on one of the characters from one of the anime that you starred in, and how, like, you said that you used your regular voice for that character, and how people in that sense didn't make the connection in that sense. That's just absolutely fantastic. That's just wonderful. And speaking about, of course, a little bit more with regards to acting and all that, have you ever turned down a role or audition for any particular reason?
Oh, I mean, yes, but boy, I mean, I'm trying to think of like something that's like recent where I like turned it down. I mean, boy, when you're an actor, especially when you're just like a regular rank and file actor, you don't turn down work unless there's something like seriously wrong with the project. But even then, you'll probably just look at it and go, yeah, I'm not even going to audition for this, and then like that's it. So I kind of can't really think of anything where I just was like offered a role and went, you know what? No, sorry, screw you, not going to do it. That's pretty darn rare. So I guess I can't really, off the top of my head, think of anything like that.
Right, that's fantastic, because that definitely seems to be the case, as you mentioned about before, with like some actors, and speaking about, of course, with some that I've interviewed in the past. I think Doug Stone once said that, to many fans I think will know as Psycho Mantis from the Metal Gear Solid series, where he spoke about that a lot of the roles that he would turn down are the ones that are against his beliefs or against his ideals. Like if he sees something that he knows is completely taboo or extremely controversial, he would be like, nope, not going to audition for that. So
yeah, no, that definitely happens. I mean, like, for me it depends. I mean, like, there are certain things that I'll look at and go, okay, I don't really, for instance, I don't like to use that particular language, but the character does, and this is like based on some sort of historical thing. Like, I could kind of be persuaded in that sort of sense, but at the same time, like, maybe I don't want there to be professionally produced audio of me saying terrible things. If, like, for instance, if I'm playing a racist character who uses the N-word, but it's like historical in nature, I'm like, well, but I don't think I'd really want to do that. So like, I would probably turn that kind of stuff down. But like, for instance, like, I'm not a very religious person, so if something is like, say making fun of Judaism or something like that, like, I'm a Jew, but I have a sense of humor about that stuff, so I'd be like, all right, sure, why not? It's not a big deal. But if it's, I don't know, some sort of terrible propaganda that like advocates violence towards people, like, okay, well, that's different. Then yeah, I'm gonna totally turn that down.
right, fantastic. Now let's get started with looking at like some of your voice work here. What was like your first voiceover role?
Ooh, I mean, technically, my first voiceover role was probably some radio commercial for something, because that's what I started doing when I was like around 6. But my first like role that would be is something that you could actually find on the internet in some way would be an animated series called Problem Child, that was based on the early '90s comedy series with John Ritter, and I played the problem child in the cartoon show, not in the movies. And that was like my first real taste of animation work. So I would say that's probably my very first one. If you wanted to get like super specific, again, probably like some commercial somewhere where I was just saying random kid stuff. But there you go.
Fantastic. That's absolutely wonderful. Now, looking across at some of your best-known roles, now one of your best-known roles, and of course was the role that introduced me to a lot of your work, was of course Codename Kids Next Door as number 1 and 2. What was it like working on that series?
Well, like I said before, getting to work with people who made my childhood is a huge inspiration to me, and that's basically what that show was. That was like every single person who came on to be like a guest role was somebody who was either a contemporary who I'd like known and seen their work in several different things and knew who they were, or it was somebody who practically made my childhood. Like, oh, who's going to play your dad? Oh, we'll just get Frank Welker, legendary voice actor, no big deal. I'm like, oh, okay, guess I'll work alongside Fred from Scooby-Doo amongst tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of other roles. Neat. We had Rob Paulsen, we had Jennifer Hale, we had, of course, Cree Summer, who was one of the main characters, and the list just kind of goes on of like, it was like a who's who of, I guess I shouldn't say celebrity voiceover talent, but as far as I'm concerned, celebrity voiceover talent. And yeah, it was every single episode was a new lesson in here's how the pros do it, kid. And I just got to sit there and absorb all of that, and that it definitely helped me as a performer, just getting to sit there and see firsthand what all of these really skilled people were like and how they conducted themselves in the booth, especially because one of the strange things about voiceover work is it's extraordinarily isolating. Like, you don't really know truly who is good at this from just watching the final product. Like, you might think you do, but you might just be watching a really good director giving line reads to meh talent, or you're in the presence of somebody who is demonstrably talented and are just incredible. But the only way you really know that is when you see people doing it live, and you realize, wow, this is the first time this person has ever even seen any of this dialogue, and they just immediately know what to do, and they nail it. Their first take is already amazing, and then their second and third takes are even better. And then you go, oh, holy cow, I am not at that level. Oh, I really need to work on this and get a lot better, because it's right in your face. But with voiceover, most of the time, you don't get to see anybody else perform and learn how they are when they do their thing. So you might falsely come under the impression that, like, I'm just as good as these, like, legends of the industry. I do everything they do. And then you realize when you see them, whoa, I got a lot of growing to do. And that was kind of what Kids Next Door was for me, was that wake-up call of, hey, you better take this seriously if you really want to do this professionally, Ben, because these guys, they don't play around. They're really talented. Well, I mean, they play around, but in a fun, creative, collaborative kind of way. And they're extraordinarily talented, to the point where, like, they effortlessly make all of this stuff that are difficult, conscious choices for most actors. They just immediately know exactly what to do and just spit it out there and blow people away.
Absolutely, that's definitely fantastic. And it's definitely true about what you said with Codename Kids Next Door, how that really was kind of a series that really brought on a lot of really well-known voice actors from that industry. As you mentioned about before, with Frank Welker to Rob Paulson to Chris Summer to D. Bradley Baker to Ben Diskin to Maurice LaMarche, like some of the biggest names in the voice acting industry, and that's absolutely fantastic. And it was a fantastic.
Flattered that you'd include me in that list of amazing people, but I don't think I belong there. But thanks. I was just there by accident.
But no, it was absolutely fantastic. That's definitely wonderful. And to many people out there that will know, like you. For any people out there who follow me on Instagram quite a fair bit, you'll probably have noticed a picture of what looks like a shelf of collectibles on there. I literally have the 5 figurines of the Codename Kids Next Door, and including a Kids Next Door pouch that I won from a competition here in Australia around 13 years ago, I think it was.
Oh, wow.
So,
I didn't even know they made that stuff. I don't even have that stuff.
So, yeah, I literally won that in a competition in Australia. And to many Aussie fans out there that will know, that also included like 3 packs of what's called Uncle Toby's, which is an Australian food brand called the Sour Fruits Roll-Ups. So that was included part of the package. And to this day, I still have those figurines and that pouch to this day forward. I've not gotten rid of it. I'm not planning to get rid of it anytime soon, because that was a sign of, like, this is my childhood right here. So
Oh, cool.
It's absolutely fantastic, and that's definitely wonderful. Now, we've got ourselves another fan question here, and this is from Fletch Goal. So shout out to you, Fletch, where he asks, and this is probably a funny Codename Kids Next Door question, did you have a sick treehouse when you were a kid?
Oh my god, no. Not at all. We had a lemon tree growing up that I think has been torn down now because it, like, developed some sort of, like, tree disease and we had to take it out. That's the closest I've ever come to having a tree house, aka just a tree. So no. Yeah, like I don't even think I had any friends with a cool tree house. So it was, I mean, look, I grew up in Los Angeles. It's a city. It's not really particularly known for the suburbs. But yeah, I did not have that kind of thing growing up. I wish I did. I remember very, very vaguely trying to make the equivalent of a treehouse out of pieces of cardboard in my room. That worked about as well as you'd think it would. It fell apart immediately as soon as I put any weight on it because it was pieces of cardboard. And my mom got really mad at me for wasting all the cardboard. So, yeah, no, I have no childhood that I think could really compare to the K&D experience.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. That's just absolutely wonderful. And shout out to you, Fletch, for an awesome question like that. Now, talking about a little bit more with regards to Codename Kids Next Door, but with the announcement of many revivals happening for so many classic series, with this year we're getting, of course, the Animaniacs revival series, but we've also had the revival movie for Hey Arnold. Is there hope for a Codename Kids Next Door revival? And if there was the chance for a spin-off series, what would you want that to focus on?
Well, when last I heard, there was some kind of discussion about a pitch meeting for the Galactic Kids Next Door, which would have been a sequel series to it. But I have no idea where that was pitched, if that actually did get pitched, if anything really happened with that. I'm really not sure. I will say this, and I hate to disappoint anybody, but those change.org petitions, yo, they don't do a darn thing, guys. I just wanted y'all to know that if you see something floating around saying, "Oh, sign this petition and we'll get," like, it doesn't really work. Unless there's like millions of people signing it. It's just, people just kind of ignore it. So as far as that, we did do a pilot that was storyboarded with an animatic, and later I believe it was a fan animated it and did a very good job with it, but that's as far as that actually went. It didn't actually turn into anything. So I would say don't hold your breath, but it's not like it's just dead in the water either. I'm just not entirely sure of whether or not that's actually still being tossed around or handled around or anything like that. And also, you know, it'd be kind of difficult, I think anyway, to just make a straight up spin-off or sequel series, because this show at this point is kind of on the older side, and it's not one of those classic cartoons that was around in like the 90s or early 2000s that it's like still running to this day somewhere. It's like, oh, maybe you could find it through some kind of digital distribution somewhere, like Hey Arnold, for instance. I think that's still airing on like Teen Nick, for instance, so people are still watching that show, and so it made sense for a revival to come around because there's still an audience for it. I'm not entirely sure how well Kids Next Door really holds up in regard to that, but for instance, if there's still a very active fan base for it, I think that then they could easily make the case. But until then, I don't know. Don't hold your breath, but don't give up hope either. Does that help?
Absolutely. No, that's definitely fantastic. And my question out there to the fans who will be listening to this interview once it's up on YouTube is, let me know in the comments below, guys. Do you want to see a revival of Codename Kids Next Door? And leave a like or a comment if you really want to see Ben Diskin be fully involved, take a huge part in the spin-off series, because that would be so fantastic. That would be amazing.
I mean, I'd like it.
I would love that as well. That would be fantastic. Now, speaking about, of course, with Hey Arnold, you were best known for playing Eugene Horowitz. What was it like playing in the series Hey Arnold?
Oh, Hey Arnold was really cool because what they did for that show was, with the exception of a couple of characters, all of the kids were played by actual children. So it gives it this very sort of timeless, authentic vibe that you can really only get by hiring real little kids to play the real little kids. And so, yeah, it was fun because there really weren't too many adults present for the kids sessions, and they recorded all the kids together. So it was kind of like a secondary school experience where it's like you go to school and you hang out with your school friends, and you go to work at Hey Arnold and you hang out with your work kid friends. So it was just fun. Yeah, it was just a pleasant show to work on, and it's really neat that like it's still airing somewhere to this day, and people still like it and still watch it. And it's still very, very relatable, and in many ways that show was just kind of remarkably ahead of its time, and it didn't talk down to its audience, which I think is one of my favorite things about it. It covered some like pretty heavy situations. I think one of the characters is Mr. Wynn, who like was like separated from his daughter due to being like a refugee of like war, and they went into that. They didn't shy away from like tougher subjects, and I always liked that. As a kid, I always appreciated not being talked down to, because as any kid will tell you, you get talked down to a lot as a kid. And it's nice to be treated like an intellectual as opposed to some dumb kid who doesn't understand anything about anything. So that show will always have my respect for doing that.
That's fantastic. And that's definitely true in that sense about how, like, as mentioned about before, and I've noticed this quite a fair bit with the Hey Arnold series, in that they went into subject matter that was kind of uncommon for kids shows at the time, especially a lot of other kids shows around during the 80s and the 90s at that time, and especially sometimes in the here and now as well, which is just extraordinary, which I never would have expected from a kids show to go into at that point. So that's absolutely fantastic. Now, speaking a little bit more with regards to Hey Arnold, we also had the Hey Arnold Jungle movie a few years back. Were you ever approached to come back or be part of the film? And did you ever get to see the film yourself?
I was not approached to do anything in regard to the film. And actually, no, unfortunately, I still have not gotten a chance to see it. I was just happy that it got made, because I know that was something that Craig Bartlett, the executive producer and creator of that show, really, really wanted to tell and wasn't able to for, just various behind-the-scenes issues that aren't really bad or good. They just things just didn't work out, and instead we did like the big Hey Arnold movie of him. I think it was something like the block was going to be demolished, put a mall in. In other words, it was just a different movie that came out. But he always wanted to do this thing where it finally explains where Arnold's parents are. So I'm just glad that it got made. But I mean, also, I'm like, I am way too old to be playing Eugene in that, so it really wouldn't have made sense for them to be like, Ben, come back and play this character that you really could have only voiced before your voice changed. So magically depubertize yourself, buddy, and come in. So I'm like, I like, there's no hard feelings or anything like that. I completely understand them not trying to get me to come back for that role.
No, that's absolutely fantastic, and I definitely understand in that sense with regards. But the follow-up question of that is, would you be open to coming back into that world if they ever did like a revival or a reboot of Hey Arnold, or even a spin-off series?
Oh, sure. I mean, I don't know what they would have me do, but like it's like I always say. I don't always say this. I guess it's not a catchphrase, but like, I'm an actor. I like working. Working pays my bills. So would I like to be employed? Yes. So like to any question you might have that's like, would you ever come back for this? The answer is yeah. Yes, of course I would. Thank you. I would be thrilled and delighted to do that. So yeah, absolutely. They ever made a sequel series or a revival of some sort, and I just got to play, I don't know, even just like random dude crossing the street saying, "Hey, I'm walking here," and that's it, I would take that role. That would be tremendous.
Fantastic. That would be absolutely wonderful. And if they could manage to get a revival of Animaniacs done, and even announce them doing like a Power Rangers reboot movie and TV series, someone just hitting the nostalgia button for those shows to come back, it's pretty safe to assume that anything is possible at this point, because that would be amazing. That would be absolutely fantastic. So someone just hit the nostalgia button a few times until they listen. Now, talking about some of the other projects you worked on, you also played across the Marvel and DC universe, from shows such as Spider-Man to Young Justice, even Legends of Tomorrow as Bebo. What was it like stepping into the comic book universe?
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny. I've never been a big comic reader as a kid or even now. So to me, these characters were always either video game characters or animated characters. So, like, for instance, my knowledge of Venom didn't come from reading the comics. It instead came from watching the 90s Spider-Man cartoon. And so a lot of the different characters that I've played throughout the Marvel and DC universes are either my own interpretation of these characters, or they're, like, in some way inspired by other people's takes on them from past versions that I saw as a kid. So it's, to me, I guess, I don't want to say it's nothing special, but it's more like I don't necessarily approach those roles differently than I really would any other role. So it's one of those things where it's like, wow, I feel really lucky to play this character that's meant so much to so many different people, but at the same time, I don't really sit there and wonder, gosh, am I portraying this character as appropriate in the comics, or because I don't really know enough about the comics to even make that assertion. So I just kind of try to take them as characters as they appear to me to make sense, and just run with that.
Fantastic. And that's definitely true about what you said in that sense, because what you said about just looking at it as like it's one interpretation of that character, where there was an interview with Todd Phillips, who did the Joker movie, where he spoke about the idea on tackling a character like the Joker, for example, who has like the 80-year history in the same way as Batman does, and how he spoke about comic books as like the American Shakespeare, in that there's more than one version of Romeo and Juliet, there's more than one version of Hamlet, there's going to be more than one version of Batman or Superman or the Joker or Spider-Man or X-Men, and it's just to look at it as just one interpretation, and how he didn't tackle with the legacy aspect of it. He just said, this is my thesis on the Joker, and this is my interpretation of it.
Yeah, there's absolutely validity in doing that, just because I think that, like, hearing different takes and seeing different takes of the same character is what keeps the character alive. Without that, it's just sort of like, oh, here's this character I've seen a billion times the same exact way, and here they are again, and here they are again. So that's why, like, for instance, with the new Batman movie coming out, like, I've heard a lot of people say, like, man, they got the guy from Twilight, that's gonna suck. To me, I'm like, you know what? I'm excited to see what he brings to this role that's different than what all of the other Batman have already done in the past. Like, I don't need another clone of, I don't know, the most recent Batman. I don't need to see that again just with a different actor under the hood. I like to see different versions. And from my understanding, I don't know a ton about this movie, to be honest, but I believe it's a younger Batman before he really establishes himself in that role. And so that's a good that's a different take than just Batman who's been Batman for 10 plus years and like really knows what he's doing. And it's a different version of the character, and it's something that keeps the character from becoming stale. So keep those waters moving. That's what I say.
Absolutely, and I think that's definitely important for any adaptation, especially with a character with a really big history. In the case of Batman or the case of Superman, is asking the question, how do you try to keep this character as fresh as possible with the next adaptation, rather than keeping it going to the same exact thing we've seen over and over again? In that sense, it's definitely true. And in the case of Batman, they decided to go for the Batman Year One route in bringing him back to his very first year as Batman, like only starting out only in his career. And the same thing with Spider-Man. Let's take him back to high school. Let's get him back to the very first characters he ever fought against in the comics. So,
right. And not only that, it's also, to each new generation, this is a new character. Like, for instance, I didn't grow up in the 1970s. I wasn't reading like the classic original Spider-Man comics. Like I would have to like look all that stuff up on the internet. And part of me, it's like, geez, do I really need to read through like 20 years of this character's history to understand him? Well, when they start reintroducing the character, they have to make sure that the people watching know who that character is without going into like a bajillion details of like this extremely long character. So they kind of have to keep sort of reinventing the wheel in like a new and exciting way. And so it's kind of to the benefit that new readers and new viewers keep coming in.
Absolutely, and that's definitely fantastic in that sense. Now, talking more about Young Justice, what was it like playing in that series, especially coming back into Season 3, and now that we have Season 4 coming up?
It's really cool. It's Young Justice is being helmed by Greg Weisman, who made my favorite Spider-Man cartoon ever, which was Spectacular Spider-Man, which I was very fortunate to be on as Venom. And so it's like, the same people who made that show that was really great, they're making a DC Comics show, like, kick-ass. And so the fact that they even think of me and have me come in at all is something I'm just very grateful for. And it's fun because I get to play Malefaak, and he's just such a slime ball. This just such a maliciously horrible person. And I'm like, wow, cool. I get to play a bad guy, because playing villains to me is always... It's always way more interesting than playing like the good guy, especially in situations where the good guys are just kind of two-dimensional. The bad guys are always really interesting. And I mean, basically, Malefaak is more or less Space Hitler. I mean, that's basically what he is. He's all about like genocide, about different Martians who don't look like him. And I'm like, wow, I have nothing in common with this character, fortunately. And getting to step inside his insane, crazy brain is just fun. Well, on vacation in his crazy brain. I don't want to live there. That's too far. But it's fun to play characters that are totally different from me, and that's been my opportunity throughout the Young Justice run.
Fantastic. That's absolutely wonderful. I actually had the chance to see a few clips from Season 3, and I was very surprised at how dark and how violent they went into during Season 3. I went like, wow, they're not holding back at all with this this season now compared to past seasons, and especially now with them going into season 4, with them, without spoilers out there for anybody who hasn't seen season 3 yet, then going into brand new characters that we haven't seen in the Young Justice in the universe yet. But without going into spoilers for yourself and without spoiling anything for us, is there anything that you would personally want to explore going forward in Young Justice?
Well, you know what? I'd like to see them, and I feel like they are going to do this to a certain degree, but I'd like to see them tackling sort of, I would say, semi-taboo issues that cartoons don't normally talk about, because, the first 2 seasons, that was made for Cartoon Network, which is, it's a cable network. They have restrictions on what they can and can't do in those cartoons, but now that it's being made for, like, DC Nation and, like, streaming services in general, the rules can kind of be bent considerably further. So I would like to see them talking about, say, gay and lesbian rights. I'd like to see them talking about autism. I'd like to see them talking about stuff that you don't normally see in these kinds of shows, because they finally can without being held back quite so much. So I would like to see, I guess, just a little more controversial stuff, not necessarily just for the sake of controversy, of course, but just push the envelope even further. I'd like to see what they could do.
Absolutely, that would be fantastic, and especially because in making it relevant like talking about issues that are relevant to what's happening in the real world, and kind of showing it in this DC animated universe. And now, because of what they've done in season 3, they're pushing into those sort of areas, but also in the fact them bringing on these new characters that we haven't seen on screen before, but also bringing back a lot of characters that we've been wondering for years. Oh, when are they going to get Wally West back? Or when are they going to get Roy Harper back in the story? Or like, when are they going to do, like, Ra's al Ghul, or like the other Batman family? That sort of thing as well. And I think that's fantastic. That's absolutely wonderful.
I mean, what they're basically doing, if you really think about it, it's what comic books have been doing for decades, which is putting things in that people don't normally talk about. I mean, like X-Men, when you really think about it, that can be an allegory for a number of different things, such as what's it like to be gay and have people hate you for something that you can't control, right? Sound familiar? Mutants? Same idea. So it's just sort of like there are allegories to real-world events, and so that's kind of what these shows can do when they're sort of unleashed like that. And so really they just be kind of sticking with a wonderful tradition that comic books have started.
Absolutely, and that's definitely fantastic. Now, speaking about, of course, with X-Men, now, as many people will know, with Marvel gaining the rights back to the X-Men and Fantastic Four, are there any DC or Marvel characters or stories you want to see adapted for live action?
I don't, off the top of my head, I can't really think of anything. I mean, like, I like to be surprised anyway, so if somebody, shows up and says, we're going to make an entire show that's all about, I don't know, some random character that gets, like, 0 attention, and they want to just turn it into its own show, or its own movie, I'd be like, hey, cool. I mean, there's a treasure trove at this point of, like, hundreds of really interesting characters at their disposal, so I look forward to seeing more stuff that's, I guess, off the beaten path. Like, don't get me wrong, I love me some Spider-Man, but we've already seen quite a bit of that. If there's some other character, like, I don't know, Black Beetle, something like that, just a villain or a hero that normally doesn't get a lot of attention, and they want to, like, spin that off into its own thing, I'm down for that. I'd want to see that. So I guess I just want to be surprised.
Absolutely, and I think that's really the best thing in that sense, especially for, like, any fans out there, like, especially for a lot of comic book fans. We want to see, like, we want to see Green Lantern done, we want to see Justice League Dark, or we want to see Spider-Woman done in the universe, and especially to, like, everyday fans out there who have no idea about the comics or know that much about it. They just said, like, you know what, anything's possible at this point. If they can manage to revive Spider-Man, have him be part of the Marvel movies, and just do something completely different with his character that we haven't seen before, that's awesome. So I think that's fantastic. I think that's absolutely wonderful. Now, the other series that you've also been working on the series such as Muppet Babies and Tales of Ladybug and Cat Noir. What's it been like working on those shows?
Muppet Babies is just a delight. It's really fun, everything is very lighthearted. I get to work with, again, fantastically talented voice actors, and I've been very fortunate that this is one of those series that has followed us into the quarantine. So we're still working on season 3 just at home. And thanks to the wonderfully talented recording and mixing engineers over at Atlas Oceanic who put this all together, they make this happen. And it's just sort of a delight that we can continue to tackle this show regardless of how bad things have gotten out there, because it's just sort of this kind of happy, bright point in my life for me, because every episode is very positive. It's very lighthearted and child-friendly, like good lessons that I think some adults might benefit from learning and relearning, I won't say, but hey, don't lie to people, be a good person. I think the world could use some more of that. So yeah, no, Muppet Babies is just, it's great. And Miraculous is, it's funny, it's one of these shows that I've been doing for a while, but I guess I don't really have any like crazy adventurous tales from the booth on that. It's just kind of it's a unique recording experience. I think I can safely say that. But yeah, I've been doing that for a while, and I think we're going to start getting back into that pretty soon for some new episodes. But yeah, I guess I don't really have too much to say on Ladybug.
That's absolutely fantastic. That's just absolutely wonderful. Now, jumping across into the anime world, where did voice acting in anime begin for you?
Oh, anime voiceover for me, well, it started with me watching Dragon Ball Z, the Canadian dub, as a kid, and going, oh my gosh, I want to be on that show, and not realizing then it's already been recorded, and also this was done in Canada, and you're not a Canadian citizen, so you can't possibly be on it, and also you're a kid. But my first actual job in anime was a show called Blood Plus, which was based on Blood the Last Vampire, which was a Japanese animated movie. And so most anime, not all, but most of them, especially at the time, were being done non-union, which meant I never even got a chance to audition for them. But this show went through my talent agency, and it was a union project, and I went, oh, holy cow, an anime. And so I auditioned for like just 2 of the characters, which was the sort of, well, the Crispin Freeman character, who went, of course, to Crispin Freeman. He's very like well-spoken and sounds very sexy and elegant. And then the other one was just like the older brother, who's kind of immature, and his name is Kai. And I wound up booking Kai, and that was my very first anime job, which I'm sure the producers probably would have liked to know before they'd hired me, because I guess they assumed that I knew how to dub, and I actually didn't. So I learned how to dub by working on a dub. And I fortunately learned quickly enough that they it didn't slow us down or cost anybody a huge amount of money, but it was a very instrumental experience in getting out there into the world of anime and getting in with different studios that do the work, so that I could even audition for some of these projects in the first place. But yeah, it all started for me with a show called Blood Plus that was on Adult Swim in America on Cartoon Network.
Fantastic. That's absolutely wonderful. And I'm just honestly picturing to myself, like, with, obviously with, like, speaking about how a lot of the acting you've done has been in Western animation, but also in anime as well. Just imagining, like, a tennis match just going back and forth, from like, I'm going to be starring in Young Justice, I'm going to be starring on Blood Plus, now I'm back to this other show here. And it's like, do you have to put on like a hat or something just to get into, like, saying, all right, I'm part of this Western animation product, or I'm part of this anime product where I'm just in a vocal booth by myself and I have to dub to these flaps that are going on the screen.
Well, so much of voiceover is make-believe, right? So, like, sometimes, yeah, you are in a room full of other actors and you play off each other. And other times, it's just you by yourself, and it's the same process, by the way, for, like, video games. So, like, I'm used to being in a room all by myself, secluded, and talking basically to myself, or pretending that somebody else is talking to me and responding to how I think they're going to sound. Yeah, no, I don't really put on a different hat or have to change my mentality too much. I find that, typically speaking, the experience is the same really, it's just how you approach it from a technical aspect of like, all right, there's pre-existing mouth flaps, so I have to figure out how to perform within those preordained mouth movements that I can't shake, and also how to make it sound like it belongs there. Meanwhile, with original animation, yes, of course, I do have the freedom to do whatever I want as an actor, but I still have to exist within the scene that doesn't yet exist. So I can't really watch what's going to happen and understand exactly what the action is going to look like. So they both have kind of like your arm is tied in one way for one, and your arm is tied in a different way for the other one. So they're just kind of different forms of the same media to me.
Right, that's absolutely fantastic. That's definitely a great mindset to have on that. Now, as many fans out there will know, that anime, 90% of the time, most anime has manga, of course, existing before that is adapted from the manga, of course. Have you ever read the manga for any anime series you worked on, or became familiar or heard of a project you worked on before you started working on that series?
So, much like with comics, I'm not a huge reader, and I'm not a big manga guy. So, for most of them, the answer is no. But I will say there is an exception, which is a show that I'm in right now called Beastars. That has a manga, and effectively a bunch of followers of mine on Twitter were like, "You have to read this! Ah, it's getting an anime! Ah, you better try out for it! Ah!" And I went, okay. And so I started reading, and I'm like, I guess this is okay. And I was like, oh, this is actually really cool. Oh, cool. Damn, I really do want to get on this show somewhere. So, yeah, that's one of the rare exceptions where I'm like, I actually knew where things were going to happen and where they were going to go plot-wise before even working on the show. But most of the time, no. I have, to me, it's just like, oh, this is based on something? Huh, go fig. I just know it as a show. Occasionally, I'll see if I can find clips of it from Japanese so I have an idea of what the original performance was like. But most of the time when I try out for these things, it's my interpretation of the character as opposed to trying to do some sort of voice match for the Japanese actor and give an identical performance to exactly what they were doing in a foreign language, but just in English. So, yeah, I don't really tend to be influenced by manga that often.
Right. Well, that's absolutely fantastic. And it's definitely interesting about what you said about that, because I remember back to a couple of interviews I did with Amberly Connors and Aaron Roberts, where they spoke about how they're huge fans of the manga, and actually they've read a lot of the manga for work that they went on to voice in based on those properties. And they had read most of the run on those anime, because I think in the words of Aaron Roberts, he said to me during this interview, where he said, I want to give off the best performance I can in whatever project I get to work on. Even though I know it's dubbed, I still want to give off the best performance I can. But you have some actors on the other side of that, like Joshua Seth, for example, who says, the one bit of advice that he said he got from one actor was he said to him, don't go in prepared, just be surprised when you go into a project.
Well, they're both methods. They're both different ways of interpreting it. Because sometimes in Joshua Seth's defense, like what he's talking about is if you go in there with this preconceived notion of exactly what the character should or shouldn't sound like, you can wind up just basically being kind of generic in the audition and not really giving them anything that's exciting or interesting or different. And you come in basically with a bunch of suppositions about how the character is supposed to play or is supposed to sound or behave, whereas a lot of things don't actually translate very well from a foreign language and a foreign performance into English, and so you really probably shouldn't be trying to exactly duplicate what they're doing. But a lot of the times, the reason why I think it does benefit you to see the thing that you're trying out for, regardless of what language you watch it in, it helps to know who the character is and what they are going through, especially what they will go through, so you have an idea of the performance range that they're looking for. So, like for instance, anime is not a genre. A lot of people think it is, but no, it just means animated. That's all it is. It's just Japanese for this is a cartoon. They have animated series for preschoolers. They have animated series for teenagers and young adults, etc. So knowing that it's an anime doesn't really help you, but knowing the type of show that it is, the type of performance that they're expecting, do they want a grounded, realistic thing? Is it more of a shonen style where you're the young anime protagonist? Is that what they would want? So some of that stuff really can help you when you're auditioning to just get the basic idea of what kind of show is this? What kind of character is this? What does the character go through, so that you have some idea of what to put on display in the audition. But maybe you shouldn't let it necessarily fully control you and lock you into some sort of performance that doesn't really come naturally to you. So I think both approaches do have their own strengths and weaknesses.
Absolutely. I think that's fantastic. That's definitely true in that sense. And I think also thinking back to that same interview with Aaron Roberts, in that at the same time he said, yeah, I'm reading it to give off the best performance I can, but I'm also trusting the director for any changes that may occur within whatever anime changes that is going to happen on for the dub in that sense. So it's definitely true in that sense, where it's kind of like, yeah, it's good to be prepared for this sort of thing, but at the same time, be prepared, be surprised as well for what changes are going to get thrown at you in that sense. And
yeah.
Absolutely.
Also, I mean, when we're talking about anime or video games or any of this solo record stuff, wow, are you reliant on the director? Because the director is the person who has all of the puzzle pieces either in their head or on paper, and they're the one who decides what is the tone going to ultimately sound like for this? What kind of performance should you be giving? And so you might come in with this preconceived notion of exactly how to play a character, and then get redirected in a totally different direction because that's not the director's vision. And so you have to hope that the director really knows what they're doing and they have this good, coherent idea in their heads that they're ready to put out into the world. And then you have to be able to roll with those punches. Says, yeah, otherwise you get locked in by your own brain. And then they sit there going, wow, I guess this guy can't really take any direction. He's just so attached to this one performance idea that he had from watching the show in Japanese, and I don't really like that. I don't think that plays in English. So, yeah, it's definitely about, yes, of course, come in with some kind of a plan, but definitely keep that flexibility.
Absolutely, and that's definitely fantastic. Now, you've played across various anime over the years, mentioning that, of course, with Blood Plus, but you also played across in series such as Stitch, Bleach, Hunter x Hunter, and Sailor Moon. What was it like working on those series?
Well, you're talking about a lot of different shows right there. But I mean, overall, some of it is, some of them have like this particular intensity to them that you want to capture, and some of them are just very grounded, and others are, you go in there and you just kind of do your best. You take a shot in the dark and you go, boy, I hope this turns out good because I'm not really sure I know what I'm doing, and hopefully the director knows what they're doing. So, ultimately, it's every show is its own beast. Sometimes there are projects where I go, oh my god, I just tanked that. That was like the worst performance I've ever given in my life. What was I thinking? And then I'll get like messages on Twitter once the show premieres, people going, oh my god, that was the best thing I've ever heard you do. And I'm like, really? And then there are other times where I'm like, yeah, man, I freaking nailed that. I'm so cool. I'm so talented. People are like, ugh, I can't believe Ben Diskin did that. God, that's awful. And I'm like, dang it. So, it's it's so hard to tell until you see the final product and really see how everything plays together and whether or not you really did a good job. So sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised. Sometimes I'm horrendously disappointed in myself. I guess that hopefully that answers that question.
No, that's fantastic. That's absolutely wonderful. And speaking about a little bit more with regards to Bleach and also with Stitch, now we've had the live action movie done on the Bleach anime, but we've also got ourselves a live action Lilo and Stitch movie coming up later sometime, I think next year or the year after. But they've announced a live action Lilo and Stitch movie and possibly getting Chris Saunders to come back and do the voice for the character. Did you ever get the chance to watch the Bleach live action movie? And what's been your opinion about like anime or like these classic animated products, in the case of like Disney, for example, being done live action?
So let's see. I think I'm thinking of the same Bleach movie that you're talking about. This was a Japanese live action movie, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I did see that. I thought it was cool. I was like, all right, I'm down with it. Like, I'm not the world's sharpest critic, to be perfectly honest. But I guess usually when it comes to live action interpretations of animated anything, I try to go in with like kind of like a clean slate and go, all right, well, let's see what this one is. Like, for instance, I watched both the live action Aladdin and I watched the live action Beauty and the Beast. the live-action Beauty and the Beast, if I'm being completely honest, I didn't really care for it. I just thought it was like, well, the animated version already did this, and I feel like they kind of did it better. I don't really see the point of this. But, like, with the animated Aladdin, I felt like they did a lot of clever things where they really fleshed out, like, Jafar's backstory, which I thought was interesting. They kind of added in sort of some political intrigue and drama, and I was like, this is kind of cool. Like, okay, I feel like they revamped this enough that it feels like a legitimate movie in its own right. And I was like, all right. So, I guess, like I said, I just try to keep an open mind and see things, but I never really ever feel like this particular, I guess, compulsion to go, oh man, I need to see a live action version of X property. Like, that's never really a thing that's on my mind, but I'm also not the person who goes, oh god, not another live action version. Then it's gonna suck. Like, no, I'm willing to give it a shot and see what it's like.
Fantastic. That's absolutely wonderful. I think that's a great mindset to have in that sense. Now, speaking about it a little bit more with regards to Sailor Moon, and you've obviously mentioned about this with Dragon Ball Z, just like with Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon has had various dubs across, like, over the years. What's been your opinion about anime being dubbed numerous times?
Well, sometimes the reason why they will, like, redub something is it's usually due to, like, some sort of licensing issue, where it's like somebody produced the older dub and they own the rights, and it's actually less expensive and makes more sense to just re-record the whole thing with new actors than it is to purchase those rights or deal with any of those kind of confusing legal battles. So for me, when something gets, like, redubbed, my opinion is if it's an improvement on the original, whether that's more accurate or just has better performances, I'm okay with it. If it doesn't really improve on it, then I just kind of go, well, I guess I'll just stay with what I already know. Like, for instance, for me, like, Sailor Moon, the original dub, that was, like, the first anime I ever saw. I didn't even realize it was a Japanese show. Yes, despite the fact that there's tons of Japanese, like, on billboards and stuff in the backgrounds of, like, every scene. I just thought it was, like, random scribbling because I was a kid and I didn't know what Japanese looked like. But, like, to me, I looked at that and I was like, oh, yeah, I guess, these two characters are cousins and they're just really good friends. I had no idea that they were a gay couple. So, like, when they treat the audience, like, a little bit more maturely and it's not something that's being toned way the heck down for the ittle-bittle kiddles in the room because they're worried about showing two ladies who love each other on TV. I'm more about that. I feel like that kind of accuracy is important in terms of, like, treasuring the original. And so I think that that's a valid reason to redub something. But if, like, you're going to redub it and it doesn't really improve it, then I just kind of go, well, I guess for legal reasons I understand why, but really? This just doesn't, I don't know, just leave it alone.
I absolutely agree on that, and that's definitely true in that sense about that we've seen so many redubs of so many classic anime over the last few years that it's like you understand some of the dubs they're going through in this case because of the fact they're trying to tone it down for a certain audience, but then you have some properties, for example, that are not meant to be dumbed down at all because you're removing the story plot, you're removing characters from the story, or ideas that are meant to push the story forward in that sense. So when you get to those kind of ideas, you just go like, what would have happened if this particular dub had got to this point in the story, which is incredibly violent, but it's there for character development? How would they have handled that? So it definitely makes sense in that sort of vein as well. And I was very amazed at, like, how much in the original Sailor Moon dub, which they brought back into the newest dub with Sandy Fox, with yourself, with Stephanie Shea, like, just how much they had taken, like, how much was in that dub and how much was in the original dub. I was going like, wow, I did not expect that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's it really shakes the foundation when you realize just how much was changed for kids. Like, I mean, of course, yes, there's the classic, I love jelly donuts from Pokemon, where it's like, all right, this is clearly a rice ball, bruh. You didn't really need to change that for, like how dumb do you think American kids are that we'd look at that and go, yeah, that's a donut for sure. But but at the same time, like, I understand when they had to, like, sort of tone down some of the more sensitive subjects. But as an adult, I look at it and I go, you know what? I can handle it, and frankly, I think kids can too. So I'd rather see some more accuracy and some more fairness to the original creator's intent.
Absolutely, and that's definitely fantastic. Now I've got two final questions here. Without getting into any spoilers, what's next for Ben Diskin for the fans to know about?
Oh boy, there's the classic. I signed an NDA, so I can't tell you anyway. But I would say, be on the lookout for stuff coming to Netflix that I have some pretty prominent roles in. There are some video games that are coming up where people already know I'm going to be in them, but because they haven't released yet, I can't confirm or deny anything on social media. So hey, look forward to that stuff. That's just I guess keep your eyes out. I'll probably say something about it on Twitter when I can. So I guess if you follow me at Benjamin Diskin on Twitter, you'll know as soon as I can talk about stuff.
Fantastic. That's absolutely wonderful. And final question, what do you think number 1 and 2 would say if they were in Australia?
They'd go, wow, where on earth is number 4 from? Because he doesn't sound anything like any of you guys. No, that's terrible. That's not, but I guess Hoagie would probably be fascinated by the fact that the water flushes in different directions in a toilet, and number 1 would just be, I guess, in constant paranoia about adults taking over this pristine land, because that's the kind of guy he is. I hope that answers your question.
No, that's fantastic. That's absolutely wonderful. Ben Diskin, thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on your show, man.
Absolutely. And is there anything you would like to say to the fans out there in Australia and in the world?
If you watch any of the silly nonsense that I produce with my mouth, thank you for tuning in and looking at all that stuff, because, I mean, the reality is, if you don't like what I'm doing, I'm not going to get hired for anything. And if I'm not getting hired for anything, I have no job. So thank you for tuning into this show and hearing me, babble on for over an hour. And thank you for watching all the stuff that I put a lot of my heart and soul into. I really appreciate it.
That's absolutely fantastic.
I guess that's pretty much my answer to that. Thank you.
That's absolutely fantastic. Well, guys, if you'd like to find out more about Ben Diskin, I'll be sure to leave links below in the description, and don't forget to check out my links below in the description too. Don't forget to subscribe down below to HannaTalk once the interview's finally up. Click that bell, comment below, and be sure to check out the links, and keep it awesome. Thank you all so much for listening. This is Simon and Ben Diskin signing off. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.